Few days ago, I did a list on the top 12 favorite bosses. Had to get rid of that because of copyright claim. YouTube sucks. Anyways, I'm back again with another favorite bosses list. So, you know the rules. I'm only going to be talking about bosses that I like, and so far I won't be bringing up bosses that I've already mentioned before, but there is going to be a couple exceptions. But everyone else is pretty much brand new here, so yeah, let's sit back and enjoy ourselves with a list of positivity. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. Yay. I don't like this game. This game sucks. At least its first boss is good. At least I can give it that. And the bosses in this game just kind of suck, except for the Gorod. I think it's a fine enough and good first boss that definitely showcases the strength and the excitement of this level. In the first phase, you have to fend off his giant hands while it tries to crush you and breathes on you, and you have to pull his hands back into the chains in order to progress on forward of the fight. 8. Move his face around a bit and open that hatch on his forehead. The second phase of the fight involves you traversing around on the top floor while the beast tries to crush you and slap you around. This fight can get a bit tricky, although it's still pretty simple and easy to go through. The last phase is pretty exciting, with you skydiving and shocking the thing's face while saving Coda from getting killed by the Gorod. This is a pretty fine first boss, and definitely showcases how exciting it could be, but at the same time how exciting the other bosses could have been. Yeah, in case you couldn't tell, I really don't care about this game entirely. But at least I had enjoyment with this first boss, and boss for sure. Like most things with Star Wars nowadays. The less I think about it, the more I would not have to. Anyway, this is a good first boss. Thank you, goodbye. Cha-cha, Matami, it's time to fight the giant luchador! Considering how much I really enjoyed Rayman Legends and its boss lineup being really good, this is definitely one of the better bosses in the game. Find a giant Titan-sized luchador that's gonna crush you with his giant hands, while still posing out in front of the audience as if this is a glorified wrestling match. This fight can be pretty exciting, especially avoiding all the barrages of attacks and not getting grabbed by the giant big old luchador. You have to smack him on his head, and it proceeds out in a 3-round battle while dealing with flames and lava. I don't get how all of this works. This is quite the intense fight that I enjoyed a lot out of. And I did have some enjoyment with the other bosses, but this is the one that I feel like is done very well. For a Titan-sized luchador, imagine fighting this guy in an actual wrestling match. That would just be something. This is the fight that can definitely keep you on your toes, and for a third boss of the game, I think it succeeds at its job just well with the perfect difficulty balance. Definitely had a lot more fun than watching an actual wrestling match. One game that I feel like doesn't get talked about a lot is Titanfall 2. I enjoyed this game a lot, but the bosses kinda exist. Except for Viper, he's actually pretty awesome. This is one of the few fights in a shooter game that I actually had a lot of enjoyment. He starts off all cool looking and doesn't even exit out of his machine, his own Titan, to taunt you, unlike the other bosses in this game. This fight can be quite tough, especially on the hardest difficulty, where 2 Scorch Titans will come in to rough you up. They can easily be dispatched. Viper himself will have a projectile attack that can be tough to avoid and hits very hard. It will send out barrages of missiles in the middle of the arena. This fight keeps you on your toes, and you have to avoid all these barrages of attacks while trying to make sure to land some hits on him. It's a simple fight for sure, but one that I get a lot of enjoyment out of compared to the other bosses in the game entirely. After destroying his Titan, you'd think that would be over, but his Titan comes back to roughing you up even more, and even attacking BT and ripping off his arm entirely. But luckily, that his Titan will get it fended off, and the cockpit will be exposed, and you can shoot at Viper entirely, or just punch him, in order to end the fight. It's a simple fight, but one that I get enjoyment of, and one that I feel like belongs to one of the better characters in the game. Although I would wish for a Titanfall 3, that would be awesome. But, at least I still got this fight to remember for this game. Doom 2016 is a game that I consider to have the best lineup of bosses, and the Cyber Demon is a really great first boss, even though he's introduced very late into the game. Considering I had to go through the massive disappointment of Doom 3's final boss and terrible Cyber Demon fight, this one is a massive improvement. Yeah, we get gritty with this great fight for Doom 2016. The fight is pretty simple and starts off challenging for a first-time player, with the Cyber Demon sending out barrages of missiles, raining down mortars, sending out his own barrages of attacks of slashing at you, and a laser attack that you have to bait out the movement in order to avoid it. Dodging these attacks is an effective strategy, and using all your weapons to do damage to the Cyber Demon will work out. After doing enough, then you pull this thing out of his chest and toss it away. That was sending you back to the dimension of hell, and the Cyber Demon comes back up again for round 2, bringing up a spiked wall that will limit your movement, and you have to avoid more of his same repeated attacks until he's finally down and deliver a satisfying finisher. This is a really great first boss, and really quite a fun, challenging fight that I really enjoyed. Definitely a step up over the disappointment of Doom 3, that's for dang sure. A shame he came back only as a mini-boss.
Rocket Head! 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Now this is what I'm talking about. For a starting boss of Crash Bandicoot 4, this really showcased. You're going up against Engine in his giant rock and roll music machine, the weapons of mass percussion. What a creative name! And this time you're ready for some good old rock and roll. Engine will send out all of these different projectiles for you to dodge and duck under, and they come out in different patterns that isn't really too cheap or annoying. This is actually a fun challenge while you wait for one of his goons to show up to smack into his boombox in order to do damage to it, and then you can hop on there to use the phase reality mask to do some damage to the giant robot. This is definitely a solid start to this really awesome game, especially when you use the quantum mask on other bosses. You have to do some platforming challenges and try to smack all these different goons to damage the boombox. And considering that this is the first legit boss, starting off rock and roll style just really showcased it. Engine has only been the first boss in 2 games, Crash Tour Insanity and now this, and considering that we have a really rockin' boss fight combined with awesome music, it's a good thing they start off this strong, right from the get-go. It's always impressive to see giant robot bosses tend to be my most favorite in most video games, but hey, at least they actually can do some giant boss fights very well in these games, unlike certain other video games. But this is a really great start to an amazing game, and overall, I applaud Crash 4 for at least trying out something with its first boss and creativity, a fun little challenge, and nothing just too cheap and annoying. I really love this first boss so much that I deemed it as the #1 best first boss ever. Sure, there may be other first bosses that could be better than this. This one, rock and roll, baby. Mega Man and fire bosses tend to suck a lot of times. Seriously, isn't there one single fire boss in the franchise that isn't terrible? Surely there's gotta be at least one, right? Now this is more like it. X4 gives us the best of the best Magma Dragoon. He had more plot relevance than any other Maverick in the series. He's the one that caused the Sky Lagoon to collapse and fall, and have the blame pinned on Red Force for that disaster. Why did he do this? So he can hide away in the volcano and want to fight the Maverick Hunters. All for a deal. That's literally why he did that. Anyway, this fight is pretty great, and quite the challenging fight. He brings out his own barrages of fire attacks, as well as a few Street Fighter reference attacks and moves. He definitely puts up a challenging fight that keeps you on your toes. You can even bring in the ride armor, just to make the fight a bit more exciting. This is quite a challenging and enjoyable fight, and definitely one of the better fire bosses that the developers had fun making. See, this is how you do a freaking fire boss, and I understand why Mega Man games just fail to bring us the excitement like this guy. Someone needs to take lessons from him, because surely we need more masterpieces and less disasters. A Hat in Time. This game had another perfect lineup of bosses, so you can tell picking one from— it's the frickin' Snatcher! Why do I even bother? Seriously, out of all the bosses, this guy is easily the best character. Featuring in one of my favorite levels, having another good boss leading up to him, and it's just all really well done throughout the entirety of the Subcon Forest. You get to fight the Snatcher, and he takes away your hat, limiting your abilities to where it's just simple movement of jumping and avoiding the geysers and barrages of enemies. He'll even have this line where bosses have to turn to the color blue in order to be available to attack. Snatcher, on the other hand,
sorry, kiddo. Blue doesn't suit me. And I guess that makes me invincible, huh? That's too bad.
he'll even bring out blue potions for you to throw at, and once you throw one, now he's available.
Did you just color me blue with my own attack? This can't count, right? Surely this doesn't count.
But don't think him
This
now
is
being
where the
vulnerable will
fight
make him
becomes
easier.
hectic.
If anything, he goes
He'll
in
bring
even
out more
harder with his
geyser
attacks,
attacks,
testing
get
you
much
on your
more
maneuverability
faster,
and
have a
taking your
working
opportunities
attack where you
to
have to
strike.
predict
It
which
makes
one
for
is
a
the real
really
one, or else you get smacked, and a bunch of shockwave attacks. This fight is just chaotic, and I really enjoyed every ounce of this fight. It's one of the best bosses in the entire game. Also, I have to bring this up, the music is fantastic. Your contract has expired feels more like a final boss theme than an actual final boss theme. Just give this a listen. This boss was going to show up because it was one that I talked about from my old list. And wouldn't you know it, it's one of the best fights Eggman has ever brought out. Sure, it may have been an obvious choice, but come on, the Egg Dragoon is one of the best fights in the entire series. the whole setup with this fight is done well. Throughout the game, you face the day bosses as normal Sonic, and you fight the Dark Gaia bosses as the Werehog. But in this fight, it's extremely personal. Eggman is done with Sonic completely, and has broken apart the entire world, and even transformed Sonic into the Werehog. Sonic has anger towards him that really shows throughout the entire fight. This fight may be easy, but it definitely is a good challenge, and for sure. He'll use his drill to swipe at you, and relying on his heavy cannons to shoot at a minigun, and causing out ice attacks. He'll even bring in a few of his little robots to attack you, and shoot out the drill to drill into the platform, and to go further down into the Earth's core. This is quite the exhilarating fighting. You have to wear all the weak spots on the machine in order to damage it completely. Then you have to do a set of quick-time events where you rip apart pieces of the Egg Dragoon, and the last half of it, you get to rip apart it entirely, throw Eggman out of the Egg Dragoon and off into the distance. This was quite the finisher, and one of the most exhilarating fights in the entire series. This thing also had a good fight for the Wii version, and the Generations version is also really good in its own right. Then there's Force's version. We don't talk about Force's version. Anyway, moving on, I'm so glad they didn't bring this thing back in Sonic Frontiers. Thank you, bye! Time to talk about Undertale. Throughout the game, you get mention about the king of all monsters, Asgore Dreamer. Heard the stories that he's a threatening king who is willing to take your soul to destroy the barrier and wipe out all of humanity. Others say he's a nice guy and wouldn't even hurt a fly. So you would expect an epic clash against this guy, as Destiny foretold in the game. Wouldn't you know it, what we got was very unexpected. He's watering his flowers and seems like a pretty nice guy. He didn't even want to go to the extent of killing you, but as Destiny foretold, you are now put in the situation where you have to fight him. He's the one who killed all of the 6 humans in order to break the barrier, needing your soul. He breaks the mercy button and the fight begins. He brings out a lot of different attacks, like relying on his staff blade and bringing out barrages of fireballs, making this one tough penultimate fight. And there is some good stuff to be had with the fight, like you bring the pie and eat in front of Asgore, or tell him not to stop fighting, his defense will drop, making the fight slightly easier to go through. The music also encapsulates this fight. It may not be my favorite, but it's definitely a great penultimate boss theme. Just to further solidify what to expect for the final fight pretty soon. He mentions that he doesn't even want to do this. He doesn't want to kill another human. He wants his people to be brought to peace. So you have 2 choices. Kill him entirely, or spare him with the broken mercy button. That's the only options you got. What you decide for the fate of the king himself. Overall, he is definitely one of the best penultimate bosses I've faced, and one of the better fights in Undertale, as the game has a great selection of bosses. Truly to solidify what to expect, and what would happen later on. Gears of War 2, easily my favorite game in the series. As much as I'm not a huge fan of Scourge as a villain, since he's just partially alright, but he definitely has one of the better villain fights in the series, and one that I had a lot of fun going through. In this 3-part penultimate battle, the first part has you do a line of quick-time events to counteract his chainsaw staff, but after doing that, he will hide off in the background, sending out tickers, shooting at you, and throwing ink grenades that will really mess you up. He also bring down stalactites and even chainsaw an entire pillar. This guy ain't messing around. You have to keep doing this 3 times in order to progress through the fight while avoiding the barrages of attacks that keeps you on your toes. After that, then we get to the second part of the fight, where we're flying on Reavers and he's riding on his Hydra, sending out a minigun and barrages of missiles for you to avoid. This phase is easy, but it definitely does get the job done, and how good it is. You just have to survive for a little bit until you get to the end of the tunnel, and then you have one final clash against him where he is riding on his Hydra, ready to take you down for good. He will send out his Hydra with missiles and trying to grab you to pull you in, and do a straight up charge attack where you have to launch a missile in his face in order to finish him off. Repeat this process 3 times in order to win. This fight is pretty fun, and it's not really that hard on the hardest setting, but it definitely keeps you on your toes for a penultimate boss. Makes me wish this was the actual final boss of the game. Some things can never be fun, my friends, because that's just the logical life of video game history. Transformers Fall of Cybertron has the best final level, and the penultimate boss is great. Enough said. Okay, to be fair, that's kind of a bit too quick. Anyway, I really like this game and prefer the final level more than the final level of Devastation. And the penultimate fight against Bruticus is definitely one of the highlights. Yeah, the fight is pretty simple and easy to get behind, but I still enjoyed it for what it offers, especially to the final fight of this great level. The fight starts off pretty simple, with Bruticus using his fist to try to crush you and a flamethrower cannon. You just shoot him a bunch of times so he can get on to his shoulder and give his face a bunch of pellets for that one go smack him. You have to hop off because he's not going to just sit there and let you pelt him forever. He'll come at you very, very quick, and you have to be on your toes with his attacks. After doing enough damage, he'll bring out his helicopter blade that will straight up kill you upon contact. So you have to wait until Jetfire brings out a bunch of EMP mines, lure him towards it so you can knock him down and launch an airstrike on him. Repeat the process 3 times in order to deal a complete victory over this fight. Leapers will come in to try to mess you up, but luckily they can be avoided and easily take care of. It's a simple penultimate fight, but one that I had great enjoyment out of. Far more than a lot of bosses in the Transformers franchise, aside from Devastation having the greatest lineup of bosses. This fight is definitely one that I always look forward to whenever I replay the final level. Halo had a strange history with bosses, a lot of them sucking so much. At least Halo Infinite actually gave us 2 good bosses. The fights against the 2 main villains, Jaga and Eshram, are definitely the highlights of this game. Jaga's fight is quite an interesting and good fight. It starts off pretty creepy and atmospheric, being this dark and eerie style of a fight where you have to avoid his fast saber slashes and keeping yourself on your toes with the dash boost. It's pretty simple, but it can be tough to avoid, especially when he disappears. Luckily, his shielding takes forever to recharge while he disappears, so you have to keep a listen out for his footsteps while making sure that you don't get slashed up in the result in the process. This fight can pose a bit of a challenge, especially on Legendary, but it's still an exhilarating fight. Then there's Eshram, which has to be one of my favorite penultimate bosses in the game. In fact, in any video game. He starts off pretty simple and challenging, with relying on that heavy cannon of his, and you just shoot him a bunch until he brings out his shielding, and you have to destroy the generators in order to take care of the shielding. But you have to lure him away, or else you'll get cornered up and end up dying. It's pretty simple, but effective for a penultimate fight. Then when you drain him to 2/3 of his health, he'll bring out his giant hammer, the Diminish of Life, I think? Great name, by the way. And he'll try to crush you with that giant hammer. It's a simple fight and has really good music, and make me wish that this was the final boss of the game instead of harbinger disappointment over here. But overall, these are the two bosses that I get excited and looking forward to fighting in Halo Infinite. The other bosses are pretty fine enough as they are. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom had an interesting fight against Robot Patrick, one of the bosses that I had a lot of enjoyment. The environment for the fight is pretty unsettling and definitely will creep someone out, especially a younger audience. This fight is really good for a 3-phase battle. The first phase starts off pretty simple, avoiding his barrages of attacks and spinning attack. The only way to damage him is by hitting the kick me sign on his back. Seriously, how do you get on his back, everyone? In order to progress on forward. After that, then you go on to the second phase where Patrick freezes SpongeBob and you take control of Sandy. You can hop around and use her lasso to bring out a bunch of platforms. Those are going to be useful because you're avoiding his barrages of attacks, but after each hit, he'll cover the whole entire arena filled with acid that will straight up instant kill you, making sure that you have to use these platforms to progress on forward to even hit Robot Patrick. This can be quite a dealio that can keep you on your toes. Then there's the final phase, and it's the trickiest of the bunch since he'll bring out his ice breath and spinning attack where you have to avoid all these projectiles while getting into certain positions on conveyor belt platforms in order to hit the kick me sign on his back to do damage. This is quite a tough fight and really enjoyable. Even the music fits for this kind of atmosphere. Although, the remake of the fight is just kind of disappointing. Original better than remake, don't at me, because the original will remain as the best part of the game entirely. Back at you again with Batman Arkham Origins and its perfect lineup of boss fights. Firefly is really great. This is quite an intense fight and one that I wish I put on the best category than Killer Croc, because this fight can keep you on your toes for how really well done it is. Firefly will rely on that flamethrower of his to create spurts of fire and tossing out nades to avoid. You have to use the quick glue to stun him and toss out batarangs to do damage. You repeat the process. It's very simple to do, while traversing around a broken down bridge, avoiding Firefly entirely and all of the fire that is spreading across the arena. You repeat the process of damaging him and fighting him, and it's quite an intense fight. Even if it's a little bit easy, it's still a fight that I had so much enjoyment out of. And the last phase is a bunch of QTE sections, but it's relatively simple to go through and definitely shows that Arkham Origins has the best lineup of bosses. Disappointing that Arkham Knight couldn't continue that trend. Finally, I get to talk about this game, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. To me, this game had the perfection lineup of great bosses, especially my personal favorite of the bunch, Forgo DDD. You face DDD earlier in the game, but this time he's wielding a mask that makes him pretty special. I have no idea, I'm not going to question it. Anyway, this fight is great. He starts off pretty challenging and simple in the first phase, using his hammers to smash you and sending out fiery tornadoes, even spinning into one and throwing his hammers at you. He is pretty weak in the first phase, but luckily he has plenty of health to where you get to witness a bunch of his attacks. Then there's the second phase where he runs around you like a dog. This guy is crazy. He'll try to charge at you, bring out enemies, bring out more fiery tornadoes, and a big inhaling suction. Jeez, not even Kirby had it that big, and he can inhale objects. This is quite a good fight that keeps you on your toes, and very simple to progress on forward of what to expect for the later fights in the game. But then, there's the Phantom version. This version is quite the great fight. It's intense, chaotic, upgraded fast attacks, and even have extra new attacks that I wouldn't even expect, and I loved every ounce of this fight. It's just the way it was set up, because the Phantom bosses are upgrade versions of the normal bosses with faster, better, and much more stronger attacks. This just blew my mind with how great this game got with its bosses, easily making this one of my most favorite bosses ever in gaming. I had a lot of enjoyment with Virgo DD, and the Phantom fight delivered everything I could ask for out of a great boss fight. And I applaud the king for coming out on top, delivering the best fight in the entire series. Out of all the outcomes, this I think has to be the top highlight. And I thank you for that, DDD. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this list of my favorite bosses. Sorry I couldn't bring back the old list, but hopefully I'll get a chance to bring back the old list. Anyway, I think that'll be it. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next countdown, where I talk about the best and the worst final bosses. That's gonna take a little bit longer, but y'all patient. In the meantime, peace, y'all.